From South Bend, Indiana, welcome to 3Degrees Discussions. I'm your host, Mike Vasquez. This is a podcast devoted to the stories behind the innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders in the 3D printing industry. This week, it's episode 150, and I'm your guest. So without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. This week, my wife, Caroline Vasquez, who is the host every 50 episodes, will be interviewing me on a range of topics from tariffs to my favorite movie. So sit back, enjoy, and thanks for listening.
All right, honey, we're back for, we've hit the third of our 50 milestones, so 150 episodes recorded as of ours today. I've got three sections I'm going to ask you, so some industry questions, some sort of founder questions, and then you know that I love my rapid fire that I do when I moderate these things in my official job. So I think it'd be a mistake to start any conversation right now without talking about tariffs, certainly affecting U.S. businesses. A lot of conversations around, what does that mean for materials? What does that mean for supply of even end products? What are you hearing from, your clients and others in the space that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Like the additive manufacturing industry hasn't had a good, I would say, 18 months to 2 years, just generally with or without tariffs. A lot of companies who had high valuations are struggling in the stock market. The uncertainty and then further uncertainty in the stock market hasn't helped that. And so even we've seen some of the more recent trade shows, numbers are down. There's not as many people buying capital equipment. There's just a lot of uncertainty in that, the sector as a whole. And when it comes to tariffs, I think there's a little bit of wait and see. I think people generally, you think about manufacturers, a lot of them are Trump voters, right? And I think they knew what they signed up for in some respects to kind of bring manufacturing back generally. I don't want to speak for everybody, right? But I think if you survey the average manufacturer, it's probably not out of the question that that's who they voted for. But I think the thing that most people can agree upon is hey, we had a reliance on other countries for manufacturing that left. That was a challenge for a lot of things that were articulated very clearly in COVID. And there's kind of a general sense that, hey, it's probably a good thing to control more of what we make and not be dependent on other countries to do that. The challenge with that is that over the last 10, 15 years is just the capabilities of our country to make products in a whole slew of industries is challenged, both from the workforce perspective and from how do we adopt the capital infrastructure for it. And so I think the sentiment I hear from manufacturers and people we're working with is a couple of different things. One, we're going to kind of hold off on hiring people or making investments in new technology until we kind of figure out what this is going to look like. I think there's some optimism, maybe guarded, that people realize, okay, hey, our raw material costs may go up, but the hope is that if we're a local manufacturer, that business picks up because people are trying to reshore. I think the challenge overall is that anyone that's worked in manufacturing realizes that these changes don't happen overnight. And so even if you wanted a auto factory to come back to the US and a company says, yeah, we're going to do that, it's going to take months at minimum. And that's a struggle. I think the other thing that people are also looking for is that there hasn't been any accompanying industrial policy to say, hey, we're going to tariff you guys, or there's going to be tariffs, there's going to be cost to new materials or cost to doing business. But at the same time, other countries have been incentivizing, hey, there's a buy U.S. premium or tax break, or buy locally type of tax break that I've heard other countries have been doing to kind of offset some of that. I haven't really heard much of that either from basis on kind of tax incentives, things like that, or even workforce, right? I think people are still waiting to see what actually happens from that side.
Yeah. Do you think from a what type of manufacturing comes back? Is this potentially an opportunity for 3D printing, additive manufacturing specifically to start to play a new role in the sort of ecosystem of, what companies are investing in here onshore?
I think it can be a part of it. I think um, there has been innovation in 3D printing, additive manufacturing that has lowered costs and kind of expanded the material palette so that more opportunities to use the technology are there. Also inherently because uh, even 3-4 years ago, like the technology overall is usually more expensive per part basis than a traditional injection molding or machine part. If tariffs are structured in such a way that makes the calculus a little bit easier to invest, I think that's helpful. But I think the other thing is like we'll have to kind of wait and see to see what are the sectors that are carved out with or without tariffs, because I think that's another question mark, right? Automotive is pseudo spared at the moment in some respects, but raw materials in some respects are not. So it's really hard to say what's going to kind of win at the end of it. I think generally the use of additive manufacturing is going to kind of be even more part of kind of Main Street manufacturers. It may not be at the production level where it's $1 million machines or $500,000 machines, but kind of small prototype systems that are doing tooling and fixtures. I think more and more people are familiar with it, know the costs and benefits of it. And then also we've seen, the small desktop printers have been around for a decade more now. And so that's enough for kids that were in elementary school and high school to be familiar with it for over a decade. And so I think that's exciting that just new people that are entering manufacturing are open to the technology in a way that maybe wasn't previously aware of. It may not be the high end stuff or the metal, titanium, composites manufacturing, but at least on the smaller kind of side, it's certainly more pervasive.
So let's keep with the buzzword topics. The other one that every conversation has to have in it is AI. What does that look like in your space?
Yeah, I think it's a handful of companies are talking about it. It's certainly not widespread. I think the most exciting, in my opinion, there's a couple exciting areas where AI is interesting. One is opening up the possibility for more accessibility when it comes to design. So anytime you have to build a 3D printed part, like a big kind of component of that is the design, right? You have to get some sort of 3D model that's able to be the blueprint for what the printer sees. When there are a number of companies, offshoots, not just ChatGPT, but are looking at kind of text to 3D model type of capability, and that's really interesting, right? If you don't necessarily need a lot of experience in CAD modeling or kind of understanding how SolidWorks or other types of expensive software work, that's really kind of a big opportunity. I think that's going to continue to get better. Like, is it ready by any means to do an engineering kind of ready part at the moment? No, but like, can you say, hey, I want a 3D file of a cube? Like, yeah, it probably can do something like that. And actually in our AMX class this year, we're trying to kind of keep on top of new trends and things like that. So we had a whole day where the students broke into groups. We tried 4 or 5 different AI modules with that exact capability. They had to kind of come up and evaluate it, and so I think they had pros and cons for several of them. Yeah. But you see the potential, right? If you're able to kind of really kind of more easily do design, that reduces another barrier to the technology. For our stuff, I think our Trace AM product and software, we deal with a lot of data on a day-to-day basis. We've got some kind of machine learning type statistics and modules that we're developing and used for automated insights and things that customers can use to get a better handle on their quality control and quality feedback from the machine and kind of making things more efficient. So we're already using kind of those types of approaches on that front. But again, it relies on kind of structured data, making sure that the inputs are correct and formally kind of outlined so that the results that you get are trustworthy and validated.
Yeah. What about as you're talking to potential clients or others in the space? Obviously, this is the time of year where you spend a lot of time on the road at various trade shows. It seems like they're all sort of lumped together in the spring. What's the biggest, I wish this part was faster, easier, cheaper that you're hearing? Are there any themes of kind of where people are hoping the next wave of development or cost coming down comes from?
Yeah, I think raw materials is always going to be a big one. I think the cost to qualify a machine, or really the cost to prove that the process works, is really where people are struggling. Is each industry has its kind of different hurdle that they need to cross. Like aerospace is very high, medical is very high. But if you look at it, kind of medical is probably further along in terms of parts that have been like end use parts in a lot of ways on certainly the metal side. But I think across the board, I think what people struggle with is the investment in the technology is one thing, but the time and pain and testing required to prove that it's going to be a viable solution is often pretty high. And I think people are looking at ways to either use existing data to kind of accelerate that or use new testing methods to kind of streamline that process a bit. And so I think people are hesitant because they've been burned in the past of technologies that have been proved, or like stated to say one thing but proven otherwise. And so I think that's a big issue. And then I think overall, just I think the industry itself has gotten into a habit of just talking to themselves, where you have these. You could really go to a trade show every other month, every other week almost, and see a lot of the same people there. And so how do you reach new markets or be more specific and targeted in the markets that you're looking at as a machine supplier or material supplier that you're really solving problems? So whether it's, hey, we're just going to target electronics conferences because we know that our products are ESD or this tooling is specific for that, or we're just going to go to medical because we're right in that space and we're going to kind of really open the aperture there. So I think the sentiment previously, where like you go to some of these trade shows, you see a lot of new stuff and new announcements. You're not seeing that anymore. I think what you're seeing is kind of people more established and like, yeah, they're expanding their portfolio, kind of making it tweaks and things like that. But you're not seeing as much new innovation as you would have in previous years.
Are there materials or applications that you think are untapped that should be that next wave, or is it really about just maturing the sort of space overall?
Yeah, I think everyone's been searching for this killer app. Manufacturing is so big that I think there's probably dozens, and you've probably never heard of them or never will hear of them, in terms of where people are kind of really recouping hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. But the calculus is always changing, right? Is like, what's the measure of success for the investment in 3D printing? Is it, hey, I can reduce headcount. I only need 4 people instead of 10 to run my operation, and I can run overnight and without assistance. I mean, that's one metric that I've seen people use. Is it parts out? Is it quality control, issue reduction? And so I don't know if it's any one particular application or avenue. There's always new materials coming out. I think there's, over the last 2 or 3 years, it's been high temperature refractory type metals and materials that can go into things like rocket engines and whatnot, space applications. But yeah, so I think it's still pretty open ended.
Yeah. I think I've asked you every time. I remember long ago. I mean, you've been in this space for the entire time we've known each other. I always say, okay, I've heard that every house at some point is going to have a 3D printer. I'm going to print my silverware on demand. I'm never going to have to buy a Lego again. I think you've always told me you don't think that's really where this is going to net out. Is that still true? Is that still what you believe? And if it's not, okay, it's in every house. Like, what is the next paradigm for 3D printing that you see?
I'm actually surprised at how many houses it is in. Um, like there are a lot of people that I run into on a day-to-day basis that, hey, my son or daughter has a 3D printer, and it could be a simple one, it could be a more complex one, it could be one like over my shoulder where now that's almost, it has to be 5 years ago, that's basically an industrial grade printer that would have cost $20,000. You can get it for almost $1,500. And so a 10 times cost reduction for a very high quality system that's very user friendly. Big opportunity there to kind of continue to reach out. So I think almost every school probably has a printer. Almost every public library has a printer. The ability to get access to it is more and more applicable. And I think you're continuing to capture the people who are naturally drawn to that kind of like the building part, like there's a coding aspect, there's a materials aspect, there's the accomplishment of like, hey, I built something for myself aspect to it. So I'm actually, I think I undersold that a bit, that like it's not necessarily the printer company is like they want to have one printer in every house or whatever it may be, but I think the opportunity to change people's mindsets about what the art of the possible is and is really out there. I think the lag is, okay, I like 3D printing, I may be able to buy one, and like, but is there a career out there for me that uses it? I still think that's kind of a bit of a gap. Like, okay, maybe they're naturally drawn to engineering, but there's other kind of avenues that could go down. So I'm actually pretty excited about like the long-term implications of what that could be.
You talked about, is there, I like this, is there a career? Obviously, you started an apprenticeship program 4 or 5 years ago. I know that the latest cohort is wrapping up. You did this sort of because you saw the need. You're not a teacher. But I'm curious, what has been the biggest aha moment? And maybe it's just that kids have had more exposure to this technology than you would have expected. But as you've been spending time with those that are in this latest cohort, like, is there anything that has surprised you in what you've seen from them in either the classroom or as you've taken them on some of these tours in the field?
Yeah, again, I mean, a lot of them, I would say to start, probably 80 to 90% had been aware of 3D printing, either through their school or something like that. Not all of them had
Is that different than when you first started? Like,
probably. It's probably
okay,
up from 20-30%. Most of the students, it's caveated, most of the students are in the current cohort go to Riley High School in South Bend, which is more of a kind of engineering focused school. So I think it's it's skewed that way, but still, I think if you ask most of the students around kind of these parts, I think people would at least be familiar with it. I think there's a more open-mindedness to alternative pathways other than college as well. We went on a tour this week at a small manufacturer called CP Industries. They support the tier 1 and tier 2 automotive suppliers, manufacturers, as well as the DoD, and they have an apprenticeship program, a formalized one, and kind of the owner was given the tour. It's 6:00 at night, and after all the shifts are done, and he's talking about what are the actual numbers behind kind of going through a apprenticeship, and what does that mean for cost implications, right? So I think the excitement about that, right, where you could go to a 4-year college, you may or may not know what you want to do, you could rack up kind of 20, 40, $100,000 in debt.
Easily.
And then you're 22 years old and you're going to come out in this job market, no one's hiring, and or it's limited, and yeah, maybe you're going to make $60,000, $40 to $60,000 to start, right? But you're in the hole and you're 22. I think in the manufacturing apprentice program that he was saying, and kind of going back to that college standpoint, right? You start off, you're in the hole, you're not able to stay for retirement. It's harder to buy a house or kind of get moving, right? On kind of some of the things people typically think of as adulting. But on the manufacturing side, he is very clear with them, is like, hey, like, if this is something you're interested in, the way we do it is you start kind of when you graduate from high school, you're 18. You kind of work full time. So you're making kind of money during the day, kind of in the forget what, like, you're starting in, I think, kind of $20-ish an hour, but you're going to school at night. That's paid for by the company. You come out with kind of a degree, a journeyman's kind of certification in a variety of different focuses, whether it's machining, whether it's not so much pattern making anymore, but design. There's a few different areas, but also they put, I think, $6 an hour towards your pension, right? So you think about time value of money. You're 18 years old. Yeah, you're not making your $22, $23 an hour, or whatever that is. Like maybe it's 30 to 40K a year, but that's when you're 18, 19. But you think of over, even if you spend 15, 20 years at that place, when you're done, you're 42 years old, you probably have over $1 million in your pension. Your overall income has probably gone to kind of certainly probably six figures by that point, just in terms of kind of the metrics. A lot of these are union shops, so there's very clear hierarchies, and you had no debt going in, right? Yeah. And so that's I think that's very compelling to people now, and people are not necessarily defaulted to like, hey, I need to go have the college experience, because I think people have seen their friends, parents, aunts and uncles go through that and say, okay, hey, like they may have wished they would have done some stuff differently. Mm-hmm. And I think people are more open-minded to just the reality of what that could look like, and the opportunity there. Because I think the other interesting thing when I started, I think it's still the case now, is that the opportunity, if you have a skill, a tangible skill, right? If you're a machinist, if you're if you do design, if you're a materials engineer or something like that, the ability to kind of work anywhere in the world is an opportunity, right? It's like there are people and manufacturing gaps everywhere, certainly in the US, probably abroad. And so I think that capability, that skill that you can carry with you, that not only is good for your job, but hey, if when working in a manufacturing plant, you get to learn about hand tools, you can do a whole lot of different stuff that you probably can know, almost go redo a basement or fix some electrical or something like that that a lot of other people might not be able to do.
Talking about, doing things that you don't maybe yet know how to do. You built a software company. Mm-hmm. Your shirt, you have your branded shirt on, Trace AM. I like the gear, honey. I like the swag. You don't have coding experience. You are not a UX UI designer. What has that experience been, and what's the traction like, in the market at this point?
Yeah. So, I think early on, I think I realized I was the customer, or like I built something, or I wanted to build something that I kept seeing over and over in the work that I was doing and the work that we were doing on behalf of companies in terms of managing data, then ultimately kind of getting to insights and kind of outcomes and reports that people could use and help accelerate their adoption or just improve their overall use of the technology. And I think I had kind of sketched on a napkin what I wanted to be the outcome of that. I didn't really have an end vision of what does it look like on the screen? What are some of the details of that? But I think especially over the last year where we kind of were really working off of MVP, probably the first 3-4 years when like we got some customers, we were able to get some traction, and that's continued to build in a really exciting way. But really over the last year, as we brought on some additional team members with a lot more experience in software development than I had, it was refreshing for me to kind of put that off on someone else. It's like I'm not a software person. There's so many dynamics to building a software business of not only the product related stuff where it's the details on the coding, security, how do you set up the infrastructure? Like I have no idea. Like I rely on kind of my team to do that. They do an awesome job. But then kind of having a dynamic where kind of Chad, our kind of business partner on this, like he's able to challenge me in different ways to think about what are the implications of adding a new feature. Like how do we prioritize things in the right way? What is the customer actually saying? When do we start putting in new features that we think are important versus when do we wait for the customer to say, okay, hey, we want this in the software, and so we kind of have to think about how we stagger and prioritize things. So for me, it's been I can answer some of the technical questions like, okay, what's the statistic that we want the outcome to be? But when it comes to even design, right? I'm again not a designer, and so like the new interface that we have, every time we show it off to people and give a demo, a lot of great feedback on that. It's like, oh, like this is really clean and simple and easy to follow, and they can log in 5 minutes and are entering data and seeing their real results. So there's a lot of work that goes into that, and kind of being able to translate kind of the customer requirements to like an executed business and executed kind of piece of software has been really exciting over the last really year or so, year and change, that we've been able to kind of take that next step.
Are there certain industries where the traction has been easier, and are there industries where you sort of think they're missing the boat by not talking to you? I know you don't like to talk about your own business, but I'm going to make you.
Well, we've been very focused. We've gotten a lot of traction in the DoD adjacent space, right?
Yeah.
Big prime contractors and work through consortiums like America Makes and things like that, which has been great. A lot of it is DoD focused, even more specifically aerospace focused, where a lot of requirements, a lot of testing. That's kind of our bread and butter in terms of like managing test data and managing information related to data that is expensive to generate, whether it's because the printer and the material is expensive or the underlying test data that you're putting together is expensive. So that's kind of like people realize that, okay, hey, we don't want to lose all the insights that we can get from this because we've already invested $500,000 in 9 months on testing. Like we need a better way than Excel to manage that. We're talking to some medical device manufacturers at the moment. I think there's excitement in other industries where there are potential for growth and stringent requirements, energy, oil and gas. We've mostly been focused on a lot of the metal-based systems. But I think polymer production is also an opportunity. I don't know if I think our intention over the next 6 to 12 months is really to expand the aperture outside of the DoD and DoD adjacent stuff. But I think there's still a lot of opportunity there. Just if you focus on that, I think you could run just a fully focused business on that space. But I think there's a lot of areas where we see potential elsewhere as well.
So let's switch gears a little bit, talk about business. Is there anything else on the industry side of things you want to say?
I don't think so.
You have been a founder now twice, bootstrapped in both of your companies. What has been the hardest business decision that you've had to make in this journey?
I think one that stands out is just trying to understand how big a team do I want and who are the right people to have on that team. I think I've certainly made some mistakes along the way on thinking about kind of what does right look like in terms of size and scope and the background, and hopefully I've kind of recovered from some of those mistakes in terms of how we think about hiring. But I think the thing that I think I've gotten better at has been not taking stuff so personally in terms of the either rejection of a proposal or things not going the way you expect. I think I've built up enough experience to say, okay, hey, there's going to be challenges. There's going to be zigs and zags that occur. We had a meeting this week that didn't go kind of the way we were expecting in terms of some of the software, the kind of sales of the software that we were doing. So we were expecting kind of an outcome where kind of a long-term project, it's gotten delayed and things like that. And so I think in the moment I'm trying to get much better, and I think I've improved on thinking, okay, like it's not the outcome I was expecting or wanted to going in, but how can I make sure that when I leave the room that there's an actionable outcome, or certainly leave on good terms. That's kind of a default. Like there's very rarely like contested, like no one's getting heated about this sort
You're
of
not
stuff.
getting heated, honey? I'm so surprised.
But it's more like, okay, how can I think of, are there other ways that I can help them? Are there other ways that they could potentially help me, and making other introductions or kind of giving me different perspective and insights for the next time I interact with them or someone similar to them. So I'm trying to be it's kind of what Jocko Willink and kind of the echelon front folks say is like kind of being detached in the moment. It's like, okay, like this isn't exactly what I expected, but take a breath, look around, like what's next on my radar. And so I think what I've liked about running multiple businesses and having a software and a consulting and this training thing is I can think about problems from multiple different perspectives and be flexible enough in the way the businesses are structured that I can like, oh, this isn't a good fit for the software stuff, but hey, they got a cool story. Maybe they'll come in and talk to my students about their career, or I can have them on the podcast, or I can, maybe they don't need software stuff. They just need help in terms of assessing if 3D printing is good for their business. And so I've got 5 or 6 different dimensions I can talk to any given person with. And so usually that's an avenue where there's some way that I can engage with them in a productive way. So it may not always be software or high value or whatever it may be, but I think there's a couple different ways that I can think about that. So I've really that's always something that I want, like looking back, I think that's one of the things that I view as being successful. And I is like, I can go into any conversation and have a few different hats on.
Like it. How do you decide where to focus? So let's change from like kind of what are you going in and selling with, and you're meeting with potential clients, customers, but your time obviously limited. We're the parents, both working parents of 2 little kids. So like, how are you figuring out where your time is best allocated? Are you doing that on a daily basis? Are you doing that I know that every night before we sit down and unwind, you make your list of what you're going to focus on tomorrow. But like, do you think, is there a cyclical kind of thinking to you, or does it just intuitively seem to be clear where you should be spending your time?
Yeah, I don't know if I have I have a list, right? Like every day I write my list down.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it's consulting, a lot of it's trace at the moment. I still think that's probably 80% of my time. If we did this 3-4 years ago, well, that would probably switch to where 20% of my time is trace. So it's naturally kind of what's busier, where do we have more customers, where's more short-term stuff versus longer term things. So every day I'm probably touching on every part of the business, especially now. This is kind of the springtime. So we have our AMX training. So I'm always thinking about, okay, hey, where's our next tour? Helping kind of make sure the instructors are prepared. And so I'm thinking about that. I'm not teaching as much on that, which is good. That we've kind of expanded the instructor palette a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think at the moment I'm trying to spend more time on where I think there's a lot of opportunity, and that's, I think, the software and trace stuff, and kind of building a business that is sustainable and offers a lot of value to the industry. But at the same time, I can squeeze things in that make high value, right? A podcast takes about an hour and then 30 minutes to edit. And so I can find an hour and a half every other week to do that. And so I get up early. I don't stay up late, but I still have a decent amount of time to to get a lot of stuff done and be efficient during the day.
What is the biggest misconception that, investors or customers who are maybe probably more on the consulting side, like, have about the actual business of the business of your business?
Most people don't know what I do. I think that's, I think the challenge that I've had is because I do a lot of different things, whether it's trace, whether it's consulting, whether it's the podcast. I mean, I still get, there's a handful of people that I've met at conferences, even recently. It's like, oh yeah, you do your podcast. And like, that's all they think I do. And this podcast isn't making money, so it's not.
You don't have any you do not have any sponsors.
No.
You edit it up in your office upstairs.
So I think telling the story of, like, for me to actually explain kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis is a little bit complicated, and in some ways. So usually I just focus on, okay, we make a software product and here's what it does, versus, okay, I also do consulting or the training and whatnot. And so yeah. I think that's the difficulty I've found in it. So I really try to know who I'm talking to and really just focus on what I think they want to talk about. If it expands to different topics, then we go from there. But I think that's kind of the biggest misconception. I would say the other thing too is, like, there's all sorts of ways to run a business. There's people that go to VC funding. There's people that get loans from a bank. There's people that kind of join a big company. There's all sorts of different ways. I think I've always liked the freedom and flexibility of kind of the bootstrap model. Is like, hey, I'm going to spend less than what I make, and we've got a profit at the end of the year, and we're going to grow in a kind of reasonable way. Unless I can prove that I can get customers, there's no reason for me to expand out to external funding. And so that's been always my approach. And some people get it. Some people are more like, oh, you don't have 50 or 100 people, like, must not be a successful business, right? And so I think there's pros and cons to all that.
What do you think is the most underrated skill or quality for a founder in, I'll say, this space, but I think it's probably something that's maybe a little more general?
I think the cliche ones are always good. I mean, you got to be, you have to have ability to persevere, or kind of go through a lot of different challenges, because it's never a straight line. It's never as simple as you thought it was going to be. There's going to be, like, you have to have, like, some ability to, like, think in multiple dimensions, whether that's like, okay, I got to do payrolls or taxes, and I got to think of, like, what's my 3-year business development. And I think that ability, I think, or that skill or that requirement really is draining, especially over years and years of time, right? It's like there's always things you could be thinking about. There's always things you could be doing. And so I think that's a big one for me, and I think also I mean, I probably have a more of a glass half full type of mentality. I think that's probably generally consistent with a lot of folks that I meet that are doing similar things where, hey, they have a conversation, they're really excited about it, and they see kind of the potential. Like 9 out of 10 times it doesn't go anywhere, but I think you have to have some sort of like, oh, I see like a through line where I could reach the end zone on that one. So I think having like, if you're always negative, if you kind of give up quickly, like I don't think that's necessarily the right place for you.
Do you think you could ever go work for somebody else? Could you ever go work for a big company?
You never say never. It'd have to be the right opportunity. I would say probably 80% no, but who knows?
Okay. You ready to do some quick fire fun questions?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I don't think you're old enough to have had an AOL AIM screen name. Did you have were you on AOL ever, Vasquez?
I think mine was Mike Vass 18.
Oh, all right. There we go. One thing you wish you could quickly 3D print in your life right now.
Good food.
Oh, you make good food. Movie you could always watch.
Major League.
What is your coffee order?
I'd have a bottle of water.
What is your baseball? So I don't know if everybody knows, but you were a college baseball player. You've played. You're now coaching our 8-year-olds team. In baseball, as you walk up to hit, there's a walk-on song. What is yours, or what do you wish yours was?
When I played in the Electrons, or on the Electrons in Chicago, which is as Caroline likes to put, a semi-pro baseball team, more like like it's a bunch of guys that were usually ex-college, ex-high school players. Because I was from Minnesota, they always put Prince songs on, like "Let's Go Crazy." So that was my walk-up song.
Pineapple on pizza, yay or nay?
Yay! I used to eat that all the time in England.
One tech trend that you think is totally overhyped.
I think podcasting is overhyped. I think everyone's got a podcast, me included, but I think there's a lot of them out there.
You have to go live on a television set. What show are you joining?
That's a good question.
It's the first time you've told me that today, so I'm glad at least by the end I got to get one in.
What are shows I've liked recently?
Go live in the White House.
No, that's not probably my number one choice. I would say, I think something with space. I don't know if we've watched any space shows, but like the fact that like I never really watched Star Trek, but like the idea of like going to all these different planets is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So,
funniest family memory in the last 6 months. Or coolest.
I think we had a lot of fun. Our daughter Hadley had to make a video talking about her whole family for her kindergarten class. So the idea was she had to kind of interview all of us and talk about things that she liked and things that she did with everybody. And so I got to do cooking with her, and Caroline did working out, and Hunter did skateboarding. They love to skateboard around the neighborhood. So I think that was pretty fun to kind of do a day in the life of us. And then she added all the dogs in our general vicinity. We don't have a dog.
For someone who is allergic to dogs, your family has a lot of relational pets.
Yep.
Okay. That's it. Anything we didn't cover that you want to on this 150th? I can't believe you've made it to 150. Like, congrats to you. That's some discipline.
Yeah. So no, I think that's great. So we'll
Thanks for letting
to
me come
200.
back and interview you. And I'll see you at home with the kids later tonight.
Perfect.